Hey you guys, my name's Catherine. Welcome back to my channel. I make videos about dyeing, sewing, and upcycling. Today, I'm gonna make a video that was requested in a poll that I ran on my community tab. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my community tab for different polls. I love to know what you guys wanna see, and I ask you guys from time to time what kind of videos I should make. So this video was requested. It is the top 5 mistakes that people make when dyeing. So I first want to start out by saying these are observations that I have made from my own experiences, and also I've taught a lot of workshops online and in person for dyeing. So these are kind of like general things that I've noticed over time. Let me know down in the comments if you've made other mistakes that you were able to troubleshoot or fix or figure out. I think that, dyeing is a complex thing and it takes a lot of practice. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The first mistake is not prepping your fabric. So as a general rule of thumb, I always wash everything before I dye it. I like to just wash it in the washing machine on hot and then dry it on hot. And what that does, sorry, there's a siren. So what I was saying, I like to just wash everything on hot, and I mostly work with cotton. So I just wash it on hot, and I use Synthropol, which is also known as dyer's detergent. And what that does is it just gets all of the sizing off the fabric, any dirt or grease. If it's a brand new piece of fabric or garment, and it's coming straight from a factory, it's gonna have sizing on it, and that kind of makes it not so wrinkly when it's in the store. And that is going to be a barrier between the dye and the fabric. So it's really important to pre-wash everything to get that off. If you don't pre-wash, what happens is it'll usually be a little bit of a lighter color. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but if you want like the best results, I would recommend to pre-wash whatever it is that you're going to dye. If you're dyeing an old t-shirt or upcycling something, which is something I love to do with dyeing, dyeing is a great way to give an old garment with a stain a new life. Just make sure that it's clean. Obviously there's no sizing on it because you've worn it before, but just make sure that it's nice and clean and dry. People have asked me before if they need to dry it before they dye it. It depends on the kind of dyeing you're doing. Not necessarily. If you want to just take it straight out of the washer and start to prep it for dyeing, you can do that. I tend to just dry everything because I usually kind of prep things a couple days before I am gonna dye, but it's up to you how you want to do it. I'll put the link down below in the description for Synthropol if you're interested in checking it out and looking for a place to get it. The second mistake that is very common is using polyester. So polyester is basically plastic. It's made from petroleum products, and it does not accept the dye very well. There are certain dyes that you can use for polyester, but the dyes that I like to use are mostly Procyon dye and natural dyes, and those do not work very well with polyester, or at all actually. What'll happen is you'll dye it as normal, and then it'll look like it got the dye, but then you'll wash it and all the dye will wash out and it will be really, really faded. There are a lot of t-shirts that are a polyester cotton blend. If you want to use a blend, you can. I would just recommend having at least 60% cotton in that blend, and the higher amount the cotton is, the better. The polyester just is not made for accepting dye. When I was in textile school, they taught us that the way polyester is dyed the most successfully is when it's being spun. So before they spin it into yarns to either weave or knit into fabric, they add the dye then when it's kind of in like a liquid form. Sometimes t-shirts or things will have a little bit of spandex in it. Like if you're doing like some white jeans that have like 3% spandex and they're 97% cotton, that's gonna work great. Just a little bit of spandex is fine. You know, spandex is obviously a synthetic fiber, but the higher amount of cotton or cellulose fiber, the better result you're gonna get. Cellulose fiber is referring to any kind of fiber that's made from a plant. So that's cotton, linen, rayon, modal, bamboo, anything like that. There's a lot of different kinds of blends of rayon out there right now and that are super soft. That will work. Hemp will work. Yeah, so anything made from like a plant. All of those different kinds of cellulose dyes will take the dye slightly different. So in my experience, especially working with indigo a lot, linen takes the indigo the best, in my opinion. It gives you a really, really intense blue color. Each fiber and each weave is even gonna give you a little bit different results. So if you want to be really, really sure, you can always do a test strip or a test swatch before. Like if you're doing a big project, I'd recommend doing that. Yeah, each fiber is going to accept the dye a little bit differently. So just keep that in mind. You can also work with protein fibers, which are referring to wool and silk. So wool and silk come from animals, so they're a little bit different than cellulose fiber. They tend to be a little bit more sensitive to heat and chemicals, so you have to be a little bit more careful with them. Like if you're using wool, you don't want to wash it on super hot because it's going to shrink up. And then there's also washed silk available, which is a great option if you're going to dye it, because you're going to need to wash it more and wash it before and wash it after. But I mostly stick to cellulose fibers because I just like the way they look, and I like to wear cotton most of the time. The third mistake that I'm going to talk about is either too much resist or not enough resist. Now this, of course, is a matter of personal taste. It's happened to me before, and it's probably happened to you too, where you open something up and it's either not as dyed as you wanted it or more dyed than you wanted it. And that is sort of a little bit unavoidable sometimes. It does happen, but you can take steps to kind of gauge how much dye is going onto it and kind of peek inside when you're actually dyeing. One thing I always talk about is that it's better to kind of err on the side of not enough dye. You can always re-dye something and add more dye. It's hard to take the dye out. Like you can try to discharge the dye, but it's really hard to control. And in general, once it's dyed, it's dyed. You can also kind of play with some bleach or some white bright to kind of try to remove it, but in general, it's pretty hard to do. If it doesn't have enough dye, you can either open it on the spot and touch it up, depending on what kind of dye you're using. I did a video about my indigo dyed jogger suit, and I opened it up and there was a spot on it that was all white, and I wanted to put some more blue on there. So I was able to literally just take some of the indigo dye and put it right where I wanted it to be. And I was very careful to kind of make it look organic, like it had happened while dipping, which is like a very delicate thing. That's kind of going a little bit rogue when it comes to indigo dyeing, because in general, indigo dyeing is all about not letting the indigo oxidize. So you want to like keep the thing that you're dyeing underneath the vat, in the vat, and underneath the surface so it doesn't get hit by the air. But I was using like a really strong vat and I worked really quickly, and it just worked out. So that's one example of how I kind of fixed something that I didn't like. And I will put the link for that video at the end of this video, and it's going to be up here. I'll link it right there. Another video I made was about fixing tie-dye, and I opened it up and it wasn't dyed enough. So I actually washed it and dried it and then refolded it and re-dyed it. And I made a video about that, and I will link that at the end of this video and put that video here also. In hindsight, I could have just opened it and refolded it while it was still wet and re-dyed it with the same dye that I had used the day before. That's another tip that I like to give, is to keep your bottles of tie-dye handy in case you need to add more. And then I could have just let it continue to batch for another 6 to 8 hours or 24 hours and reopened it and looked at it and washed it. The fourth mistake I see a lot is not using a fixative. This one is a little bit tricky because it all depends on the different types of dye that you're using. If you're using Procyon dye or tie-dye, you're gonna wanna go with something like a soda ash, which I will put a link down in the description below. That is a great fixative, and what fixative does is it makes sure that the dye sticks to the fibers and doesn't wash out, and also it kind of keeps it from washing out wash after wash. Every single kind of dye is different. So sometimes you can get a kit that doesn't come with a fixative because it's actually inside the dye. But in my experience, when I'm working with Procyon dyes, using a soda ash is going to give you really nice, vibrant colors that stay wash after wash. If you're using natural dyes, it all depends on the kind of dye you're using. And that's like a mordant that you would use, which you can use different kinds of mordants and get different types of results. I would recommend taking a class or reading a book about mordants. I'll put a couple down in the description below that I really like and that I've read that I think are great. But in general, it just really depends on the kind of dye you're using. And you really want to make sure you read the instructions. If it's a kit, just read the instructions before you start, and do as much research as you can about that particular kind of dye to see what kind of fixative you need or what kind of mordant you need, and the result of different types of fixatives and different types of mordants, because it will vary your results. The fifth mistake that I see is having expectations. So expectations are the root of all disappointment. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't try to plan, or you can't have like an idea or an inspiration for what you want to do. But, you know, at the end of the day, tie-dye always has an element of surprise. Any kind of dyeing can kind of go in a little bit different direction than what you're expecting, and that's part of the fun. I would say leave room for some accidents. You never know. Sometimes accidents can come up with the best things, and it might even give you another idea for a new project. I think it's all about experimentation and just going with the flow. Sometimes I'm doing a project and something happens, and I'll just pivot and something really great will happen. Another thing is that sometimes something that you think looks really bad is not that obvious to other people. They might actually love what you've done. So I would just keep that in mind when you're doing any sort of project. Also, I consider this a practice, an art practice. So I dye lots of things all the time, and I'm always learning new things from every single project. If I'm not sure about something, I'll often just keep it in my scrap pile and use it for quilting or another project. I'll just repurpose it for something. So nothing is ever in vain. That concludes today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If I missed any mistakes, be sure to put them down in the comments below, and be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. Be sure to go to my website and sign up for my mailing list so that I can always send you guys new dates for my online dyeing classes. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Be sure to check out my social medias at Onyx Art Studios and go to my website to check out all my online dyeing classes. If you enjoyed this video, I'd recommend checking out these videos here. You can also go to my channel and check out all of my dyeing tutorials. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.